Way back in the 1960s, a psychiatrist named Dr. Eric Berne wrote this book that, honestly, is still kind of mind-blowing. It's called Games People Play, and it pulls back the curtain on our daily conversations to show us this whole hidden world of psychological games. It's a really clear, maybe even a little uncomfortable way of looking at all of our relationships.
So, let me ask you this. Have you ever been in an argument, maybe with your partner or a friend, and it feels familiar? Like you're both just reading from a script you didn't even know you had. You say the same things, you hit the same beats, and it always ends in that same frustrating place. Well, what if those patterns aren't just a coincidence?
And this is Berne's big, provocative idea. He's basically saying that most of the time when we think we're just talking, we're not. We're actually playing these subtle, unconscious games. They have unspoken rules, predictable moves, and a very specific outcome. And let me be clear, he's not talking about fun and games here. These can be deadly serious.
So how do we even begin to spot these games? Well, according to Berne, the key to cracking the code is understanding that we all have three different voices or states of mind that we operate from at any given moment. He called these the parent, the adult, and the child. You can literally think of them as three different people living inside your head. Each one has its own personality, its own way of talking, its own set of feelings. And the first step to seeing the game is figuring out which one is doing the talking.
First up is the parent. This is basically a recording of everything our parents taught us, both the good and the bad. It's that voice of authority in our heads, full of shoulds, don'ts, and because I said so. You know, whenever you hear yourself saying something your mom or dad used to say, yeah, that's your parent ego state making an appearance.
Then we have the adult. The adult is your rational, logical self. It's not driven by emotion. It's like a computer. It just processes data, looks at the facts, calculates the probabilities, and makes a decision. When you're calmly working through a problem or just trying to figure something out, you're in your adult state.
And finally, we have the child. This is where all the feelings are. It's the source of our joy, our creativity, our sense of wonder, but it's also where our fears, our tantrums, and our insecurities come from. It's the part of us that's still reacting to the world the way we did when we were kids. All right, so we've got these three voices inside us. The really fascinating part is seeing how they interact when we start talking to other people. Berne actually created a whole system for this called Transactional Analysis. So, a transaction is really just a fancy word for a simple exchange. Think of it like a game of catch. I say something to you, that's me throwing the ball. That's the stimulus. You say something back, that's you catching it and throwing it back. That's the response. The game is all about which voice, parent, adult, or child, is throwing the ball and which one is catching it. Now, conversations are easy and they flow really well when we're on the same wavelength. If my adult asks your adult a straightforward question and your adult gives a straightforward answer, that's what he calls a complementary transaction. The lines are parallel. But what happens when those lines get crossed?
A crossed transaction is a conversation killer. I mean, it stops it dead in its tracks. Let's say you ask a simple adult question like, hey, have you seen my keys? If the other person shoots back from their defensive child state and says, why do you always assume I lost them? Boom, the transaction is crossed. You're not talking about the keys anymore. A totally different conversation, probably a fight, has just started.
Okay, so this brings us to the main event. We've got the players, the parent, adult, and child. We've got the moves, the transactions. Now we can finally understand what Berne really means by a game. All right, I know, that sounds super academic. Let's just cut through the jargon. The two most important words there are ulterior and predictable. All it means is that a game is a series of interactions that look totally innocent on the surface, but underneath, there's a secret hidden motive. It's dishonest at its core, and it's always heading towards a very specific psychological payoff for the players.
So here's the bottom line. For something to be a game, it has to have these four things. 1, a sequence of moves. 2, a hidden agenda. 3, a predictable ending you've seen 100 times. And 4, the most important part, a payoff. And that payoff is usually a familiar feeling, like feeling superior or like a victim or just feeling right, that the person playing was secretly looking for all along. I know this all might sound a little abstract, so let's make it real. We're going to look at two of Berne's most classic examples to see exactly how these games show up in everyday life. So Berne tells this story about a woman, Mrs. White. For years, she complained that her husband was so restrictive he wouldn't let her take dance lessons. But here's the twist. When he finally said, "Fine, go take lessons," she discovered she was absolutely terrified of dance floors. She never actually wanted to go.
So what was the game here? On the surface, the social level, she's saying, "You're holding me back from having fun." But the real message, the ulterior psychological one, was, "Thank you for giving me an excuse not to face something I'm scared of." The payoff for her? She gets to blame him for her problems, and she never has to confront her own fear. It's a win-win in a really dysfunctional way.
Okay, this next one has let's just say, a very blunt name Berne gave it. This game is all about justification. The person playing this game lies in wait, sometimes for a long, long time, for someone else to make one tiny mistake. And the second they do, they pounce and unleash all this pent-up rage that is way out of proportion to the actual mistake.
Think about it. A contractor does a $400 job and makes a tiny $4 error on the bill. For the player, this is perfect. On the surface, it's an adult-to-adult discussion about a billing error. But the psychological game is really a parent punishing a naughty child. It's saying, "Aha, I knew you were a crook, and now I have proof." The payoff? A huge rush of righteous, justified anger.
So if these games are so destructive and dishonest and just messy, why on earth are we all playing them all the time? Well, it turns out they actually help us meet some very real, very deep human needs.
The simple reason is this: games are safe. They're a substitute for something we all crave but are often way too scared to actually go for, and that's real, genuine connection. Games do a lot for us psychologically. They give us a predictable way to fill up our time and interact with other people, so we're not just sitting in silence. They give us what Berne called strokes, which is basically any kind of attention from another person, whether it's good or bad. And most importantly, they confirm our life position. You know, those deep down beliefs we have, like "I always get taken advantage of," or "nobody can be trusted." The game provides the evidence.
But, and this is the hopeful part, Berne says there is an alternative. The way out is to recognize the games and just refuse to play your part. When you do that, you open up the possibility for what he calls real intimacy. And he doesn't just mean romance. He means a totally honest, open, game-free way of being with other people that is actually deeply satisfying.
And really, that's the powerful question this whole idea leaves us with. Because once you start to see this framework, you can't unsee it. So I'll leave you with this. Take an honest look at your own life, at your own frustrating patterns and predictable arguments, and ask yourself, what games are you playing?